Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group. We are back for a special episode of HR We Have a Problem today. And I'm joined by my partners and two of my best friends, Susan Richards, the founder of Sapient Insights Group, and Stacey Harris, our Chief Research Officer, who most of you already know from her podcast, Spilling the Tea on HR Tech. And if you haven't listened to it, you should. And our big HR Systems Survey white paper, which we just released just in time for your holiday reading pleasure. So for this episode, I wanted to close out the year by talking about big changes, trends, happenings that we saw in 2022 and where we see this going for 2023 from both a professional and a personal perspective. We all know that everything we experience is shaped by our own personal experience as individuals. So as we talk about these things, I'd like to understand, too, how they've impacted us personally. So Stacy and Susan, welcome to the show. Let's get into the huddle.
Thanks, Teri. It's great to be with you guys again today.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for plugging the paper. It was a hard one this year, but we got it out just in time, as you said, for the holidays. Very excited to be here. Sorry about the frog in the voice. I'm still getting over a cold. I think everybody's getting them this time of year, but we are excited to be talking about wrapping up this year and heading into 2023.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that. I've been on a lot of calls this past week where people are telling me they're just getting over colds or they still got a froggy voice. So hopefully that clears up for the holidays and you can talk to your family and friends if you're not somewhere where it's going to be so cold that you don't want to go out. So I've understood now it's going to be like below zero here this weekend, and I'm not sure I want to go anywhere. Yeah.
That's cold. Yeah. I'm in North Carolina. We don't get below zero too often. I think it's just going to be chilly, but yeah, below zero is why I moved from Ohio.
Yeah.
And I just keep moving south.
But it's going to be cold this weekend, even in Florida, right? Susan?
Yeah. We're gonna see some 30s, and rumor has it there might even be some 20s in the mix. Ooh. But we'll get through that for the weekend and then be back to our balmy 50 and 60 degree weather.
Well, we will survive, and hopefully everybody will have a great weekend. So, Stacy, I'm going to start with you. You've been out there this year at some big events in both the U.S. and outside the U.S., talking to HR tech vendors, talking to their clients, talking to other analysts. What are some of the big shifts or market changes that you saw in 2022 that have had a big impact on from your perspective?
Yeah. And it's been an interesting year because I think we started off the year grappling with what everyone was talking about was the Great Resignation, or was the lack of talent in the market, was, everyone who had the ability to shift jobs and wanting to make new starts were. And then we got to about the middle of the year and we started to hit some slowdowns. And so I think, this is the year where we saw some real interesting shifts in the focus on technology, from everyone scrambling to try and make sure they had technology, understand the risks of who they might be losing, better recruiting tools, more so on the funnel side and on the retention side. And then a lot of focus on internal mobility towards the middle of the year. And then it just slowly started to shift towards, okay, we know things are slowing down, but now we really have to address the technology that was causing us challenges in 2021, 2020, and in the beginning of 2022. So what I saw at the beginning of the year was a scramble to get technology could meet immediate needs and help people understand the matches and the people they wanted and who was going to stay. At the end of the year, I saw a shift more towards, and we definitely heard this in the conversations, what were the tools that blocked us from being able to do our jobs? And so we saw a lot of focus on skills technology towards the end of the year, payroll management, a lot of those systems that people found caused them the heartache between either the COVID-19 crisis or this Great Resignation. And what we found is that people are spending a lot of time thinking about, what do I need to fix? If things are going to slow down, what do I need to fix the next couple of years? And I don't know if that's showing up quite as clearly in research yet, because I think a lot of research is still always a little bit behind, but we definitely in the market, and our data was definitely starting to show it as people were looking forward. And I don't know, Susan, you guys are working directly with a lot of clients. Did you guys see that in the client conversations as well? I mean, that's really, I think we saw it on the front end of the conversations, I think, as in the industry.
Yeah. So what we saw or continue to see is that 2022 was the year of surprise. It was the year that the world went back to work. We had been in this kind of weird COVID bubble for a couple of years. And I think everybody woke up in January of 2022 and said, we've got to go back to work and we've got to start to produce again. And so I think people who thought we were going to go back to the way things were surprised that we didn't go back to the way things were. And I think those who thought that everything was going to continue exactly the way it had been for the last 2 years were also surprised. So there was this kind of chaotic cacophony of the quiet quitting and great resignation and quiet firing, and then some not so quiet things that started to happen in the marketplace. So from an like employee employer engagement perspective, I think everybody had assumptions going into 2022 about how things were going to be, and then as the world often does, it guides us in where things really needed to go. So I see that what we are hearing is what worked for us in the past doesn't work for us in the future. And I think that is driving a lot of conversations and a lot of policy changes, a lot of reviews of how we've done things in the past and process transformation. And along with that comes the technology, because the technology is the lever that often gives us the opportunity to make those big shifts. So we've seen a lot of transformation activity happening in the HR space this year.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, what's interesting about the year that it was, this concept of the distributed workforce has really started to change our thinking, where we thought this was just, okay, work from home, that's great. We'll have to do some things differently from a payroll perspective, and we'll have to do some things differently from an engagement perspective. But what we're really finding out now is that this has opened up the whole world of, Stacy, back to your point about the pipeline, now who we can get in that pipeline. So individuals are no longer resigned to what are the options in their local market, and they don't have to move. And employers now have a global workforce to choose from, regardless of where their offices are. So I see that, and that really evolved this year, right? It was kind of, hey, this is nice, work from home. Are we going to get to continue to work from home? To we're demanding to work from home or work from anywhere, basically, at the end of the day. And I think that's going to start to drive, and Stacey, I'd love your perspective on this. Just, it's going to change a lot of the way we think about the technology. We've been talking a lot about the employee engagement, and now with these distributed workforces, that changes the game in terms of that employee engagement and our ability to use the technology to get the job done and stay productive and efficient in the organization. So what are your thoughts about the employee engagement space and how that's going to evolve with this distributed workforce?
I've been thinking quite a bit about this because we only did a couple of pages because there's so much data in the report this year on the emerging tech, and we'll do more down the road. But what I really think is happening with the employee engagement market is that we're kind of splitting it a little bit. There's the HR self-service component of it, which is what is HR doing to ensure that experience matches the kind of service delivery models they're putting in place. But I also think the other side of what's happening with employee experience is understanding that the employee experience isn't just about what happens at work, about the feeling of the employee as they come into work. And so I think we're going to hear a lot more about this whole self conversation, and we're going to hear a lot more in the details about figuring out tools that you can provide to your employees that help them do a better job balancing the stress and the challenges they have in their home life to do a better job balancing what's going on in their work environment. And I know that oftentimes seems a little counterintuitive, because when you think about the employee experience as maybe just the technology environment or just the services that we're delivering them from HR, what a lot of organizations are realizing is that no matter how good you are at providing an experience inside the company, if the environment either that they are working at in a home environment, or if the stresses that they have personally are impacting them, they can't take advantage of all that you're offering at an employer level. And so I think we're starting to realize that these two worlds are not disconnected as we oftentimes would like them, or businesses feel like that it would be easier to have them, right, disconnected. They are very connected. So to me, that's probably going to be the biggest shift we're going to see next year in employee experience, is not just about asking, how are you feeling? What are you doing? What's your engagement level? But understanding that it's not always a work conversation, but it's also a human conversation. And we have to figure out how to help them balance that. So it's a harder conversation to have, because it feels much more fluid, I think, than what HR is comfortable with oftentimes. But I think it's a piece we're going to have to dive into.
The lines are definitely getting more blurred.
Yeah.
Yeah. Susan, you've been on the ground this year in a number of organizations that have been implementing new technology. Have these conversations, are they being had at the client level? And in terms of HR, are they talking about the employee engagement, or are they just so focused on getting the technology implemented that they haven't turned their sights to this yet?
I think there's an awareness dawning on clients as they start these technology implementations. And they're typically, and what I've seen the last year, very focused on executing a successful project. So on time, on budget, within scope, and not burning out your resources, which are all wonderful criteria to set up as success criteria. As the projects got into the design phase and the testing phase, that's where the awareness usually dawns on the client that this is way more than a technology conversation, and the changes that we are assuming that we're going to make are going to impact the employee experience, the all of the stakeholder groups, the employees, the candidates, the retirees in some cases, managers in particular. So it's usually starts out as purely a technology conversation. And then the clients where we're seeing them have a lot of success and really take advantage of the power that the technology can unleash are the clients that are willing to have those bigger conversations and consider the broader impact of what's happening with their employee engagement. And I think one of the things that I saw this year was that employees were really focused on what's in it for me, and became more bold about saying what they wanted and what they needed. And the clients that I have seen have success are listening, and they're taking action. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see who the winners and the losers are going into a more difficult economic situation that we'll see in 2023, to see if those organizations that have taken a more employee focused perspective continue to be the more successful organizations.
Yeah, well, we all know technology is critical to supporting these processes, but at the same time, without good process within the organization and without a good coexisting culture, the technology doesn't matter that much. It's not going to solve your your problems. You've got to have good ideas. You've got to have good processes. You've got to have a good way to roll that out to the organization. And to, I think, Stacy, one of your favorite words is get adoption of these solutions, because without adoption, you don't get the results and the data that you need.
Yeah.
We were just,
So one of the things that I'm seeing is the teams are getting bigger. And with this distributed workforce, the involvement in these large transformation engagements is getting more distributed as well. So, rather than having a team of 10 or 15 people sitting in we used to call them war rooms, but I'm told that that's not what we're supposed to call them anymore. Command centers are the new term. So rather than having a small group focused in one area, we're seeing organizations pull in stakeholders from across the organization to get some of those good practices that they might not have taken advantage of in the past. And that's one of the things that we try to guide our clients on is you've got a lot of talent sitting in your organization. Leverage them, listen to them, take advantage of what they're trying to tell you. And your adoption rates will go way up when the folks who are being impacted feel like they've had a say in the process.
Yeah, that is huge. And the idea of listening, right? It sounds so. It's the hardest thing I think sometimes that companies do, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, they'd much rather listen to outsiders than insiders. And what we try to do is remind them of why they hired all these fabulous employees in the first place. They hired them for their thoughts and their ideas and their innovation. So let's take advantage of that.
Stacy, are we seeing any different? I know we usually have a section in the paper about new roles developing in HR. And a lot of times that's more technical related, but it sometimes gets into the broader HR organization. Are there any big new roles that you see for 2023 on the horizon based on what we're talking about here with employee engagement?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Teri, because I don't know that we actually put it in the paper this year. That's going to probably be in a section that we're going to do a little bit later in the year on the changing role of the HR function, the HR technology function. What we are finding, I think, new is always a relative term, but there's definitely a more broad role that is sort of developing in the market that is the VP of employee experience. Sometimes it's the VP of digital experience. Sometimes it's the employee engagement role. So we've seen it labeled a couple different things, and it sits in a couple different places. In cases, it sits in sort of a learning talent area. So it's basically the new term people are kind of using for talent management in their organization. In some areas, it sits above all of, it's not just an HR conversation, it's more of an enterprise strategy conversation about digitizing the entire organization. And we've seen a lot of that happening in the market. So you have this sort of a role that's trying to basically create a digital experience, both internally and externally for the organization and figuring out how those fit together. And that's a very strategic thing we're seeing in a lot of organizations. But the one I think that we're seeing that's probably the most interesting is this sort of shared service kind of a model, which is rolling up in more of an enterprise experience conversation. And what we're seeing there is it's generally being led by someone who either sits in or oversees all of a global or multi-shared service model. It is shifting the shared service conversation from a services conversation and a cost-cutting conversation, value add conversation, which is a new paradigm shift for them. And those roles are definitely being tasked with looking at the technology broadly across the organization from a different purview from maybe the head of IT or the head of HR or the head of the business unit functions. They're looking at it. How do we consistently create experiences that are that cause less confusion in the organization? Because what we're hearing is too many systems, too many different ways to access information, too many different models of how we interact with employees. And that's becoming a real problem for our end users. Is that I think there's a stat out there that, an employee can touch maybe 99 different applications in a day. I don't know if that's exactly true or not, but I mean, our data alone shows that on the HR side, they're probably logging into anywhere between 15 to 20 different applications. If they're in a mid-market to large organization, even small organizations, we're asking them to log into maybe 3 to 5 different applications. And that's just HR. So that's I think the most interesting new role that we're seeing come about. And we're hearing a lot of organizations trying to figure out, does that role also own things that you wouldn't expect them to own, like not just the experience, but things like skills or the flow of data, because that has a lot to do with the experience too. So there's just some interesting things I think going on in that role. We've had a couple of clients I know who have asked us about it, but I don't know that we're seeing, I think it is still pretty nascent in the market as well.
Yeah, Susan, what are you saying?
Yeah, Stacy, as you were talking about that, it prompted me to think about the kind of in real life implications of having all of those multiple systems doing things different ways. That there's a lot of energy around pay transparency and equity in the marketplace, and that in itself has spawned significant amount of effort around trying to make the architecture of jobs, roles, responsibilities, more clear and more consistent. And I'm seeing it in a lot of organizations now where, they came together as through mergers or acquisitions, and it was easier to let everybody stay on their old systems, their legacy systems, with not just their legacy systems, but their legacy policies and procedures and job descriptions. And now all of a sudden, with this increased emphasis on transparency across organizations up and down and throughout, that practice has come back to bite us a bit. So there's a lot of energy now around making things more consistent. So it makes sense to me that there would be a lot more emphasis on shared services and changing the service delivery model to a shared service center or a shared experience is really what's happening.
Yeah. And is that role sitting inside HR or outside HR?
The only one I'm seeing sit inside of HR is the one that's focused more on a talent conversation, right? Most of them, I'm seeing them sit outside of HR, at least in the conversations I've had and the data that we're seeing. I don't know, Susan, on your side, are you seeing HR itself create some of these roles, do you think?
Yeah, I am seeing it in HR, also seeing it in operations. So a role that is in charge of or taking care of the shared service experience often is sitting in an operations, reporting into the COO. And then you see smaller versions or more limited scope versions of this sitting in a finance function or a supply chain procurement function. And ultimately, and I think it just depends on where the organization is in their evolution and what they want to bite off in terms of the transformation. So they may start off with having shared services reporting into each one of the functions that the shared service is supporting, and then eventually migrating to something that is more enterprise-wide. Because we can only absorb so much change at one time.
That is so true. And there was definitely a lot of change over the last 3 years. So hopefully coming into 2023 and, probably up to 2025, which we have some exciting initiatives going on around. I'm really interested to know what you think maybe some of the big bets for the next year and the next 3 years are. Susan, what are your thoughts? Do you, given everything that we've talked about here, do you see something coming that's going to be a big bet that people really need to be focused on, or need to start thinking about how are we going to deal with this?
Yeah. Stacy mentioned earlier being more human. I think that is going to be a huge game changer organizations that are willing and able to consider the whole human experience, I think they're going to do much better in what is probably going to be a difficult 2023 from an economic perspective. I think that's going to separate, those organizations that are going to take off and thrive versus those who are going to struggle. We saw some of this, we saw foreshadowing of it in 2020 when our data actually told us that those organizations who had good processes, good practices in place, they took care of their people, they were the ones who came out of 2020 in a stronger position. And I think you're going to see that on steroids in 2023, 2024. So the balance of power, I think, is going to shift a bit. It went way far to, an employee focused power base. I don't think it's going to shift way far back to an employer power focus. I think we're going to see a balance. And I think, organizations that recognize that and embrace it are going to be the ones that we're going to see grow and expand and who are going to hold on to that high caliber talent that everybody is out there scratching for. Our workforce continues to shrink. We're getting older. We don't have as many young people coming into the workforce, and the talent that is out there, that is really high caliber talent, is going to have their pick of roles and companies, and those organizations that do more than just pay them fairly and give them decent benefits, the ones who are really considering their talent humans and helping them work through life, are going to be the organizations that are successful going forward.
Yeah, I love that. And, when I think about to your point, being more human, and yet we want more technology as well. So how do we bridge that gap between the technology that we need to not just do our jobs, but to be engaged and to, be efficient, talk to people, those types of things? How do we bridge that humanness of the technology? Is that, Stacy, is that where we're going? The technology is going to become more human so that we're just all sort of integrated here?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I went to look up, and so I've been reading this book. So if you're a sci-fi fan, I think it's called The Poster Girl. And it's a story about us, in the foreseeable future, going too far, right? Having technology so invasive into our lives that it's telling us what to do every day and every minute, and it's adding value to everything we do. And what
you mean like social media?
Yeah, exactly. and the whole story is about what happens when that crashes back to somewhere in the middle, right? That technology is an enabler up to a point where then it becomes invasive. And I think the next generation, I think this is going to be the next generation's biggest battle, will be ensuring that the technology adds value to our lives, because there are so many things that can add value while it has really stringent guardrails. And to me, that's the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge for our generation, is to make sure that we put in place the tools for them to build the guardrails, because we don't know, we can't even envision what technology will do in 10 years, right? But we have to give them the tools to have those guardrails, which means we have to start, and at this time, putting in place standards and processes and expectations about what we think this data should be used and how it can be used, so that the next generation can start to say, this is how I want to live with technology. I think, to your point, it's funny when you asked that question, I thought, boy, I've got like a long-term vision and a short-term vision. And I think this is maybe a really good example of how this is going to play out. I think on-demand or earned wage access payroll is going to be huge next year. I think that's going to be one of the biggest, fastest growing places that we're going to see uptick in. And not just because it seems like a cool thing and the gig economy all wants to pay them, but I think because the next generation of workforces sees the value of their money differently and wants access to that money in a different way. And I think companies are going to realize that that's going to allow them to think the idea of payroll, which is fundamentally one of the biggest, hardest things that we have to do inside of companies. And that in itself will change the role of HR more than we realize in the market, because it's going to make us rethink the idea of, right now it's every 2 weeks, every month, whatever your pay cycle is, get your timesheets in on time. Nothing's immediate in pay in HR. It all has a process and a timeline. And it's one of the few things in our lives where we have to kind of go by the guidelines and the rules. Pay on demand is starting to open up that bucket and starting to say, can you personalize? Can you on demand the work and the pay? We've never been able to do that in HR. We've never been able to treat people to some extent as individuals. So I think that's the start of it. And it's a very small piece that's going to open up the market a lot. And then longer term, if I had to really look at where I think, the market is heading, I think the big bet that everyone should really make is on non-invasive technology and data flow architectures. I know that doesn't sound nearly as sexy as a new piece of software, but what we're finding in the market right now is that people don't want to be bugged by technology. They don't want to know it's there. They want it gathering information, technology that can capture information from all the various other ways, which we're sort of giving signals and data and information, but then can parse it, contextualize it, and then flow it to all the right places. That's going to be the biggest bet. Nobody does it well yet. But if I were finding something now that I wanted to invest in for a 5-year or a 10-year outtake, I'd be looking in that space. So that's a really long outlook, Teri. I don't know if that's going beyond where you wanted to go.
No, that's great. I think one of our challenges is going to be to come up with a sexy title for that, because that sounds really boring. Yes. Data flow architecture. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people who don't want to go there.
But as Stacy was describing it, I got very excited. So exactly. I'm going to put my marketing team to work and see if we can come up with a fabulous new title for that. Yeah. Because you're right. That is going to be the next big bet. And it's that consumerization inside the organization to the extreme. And we know that it can be done because it is being done in the consumer space. So there's no reason that we can't adapt that in the HR space. Now, the question will be, are the HR organizations or HR colleagues out there courageous enough to embrace that and run with it? And that would be a fabulous way for our HR colleagues to be seen as more strategic. And, Teri, you teased it a little bit, this challenge that we have going for the next 2 years, helping HR, challenging HR in the HR community to becoming more strategic over the next 2 years. And to get to a point where at least 55% of us are seen by our organizations as adding strategic value. Stacy, what you just laid out would be an interesting conversation for our HR colleagues to have amongst themselves and then with their business partners.
Definitely. 55 by 25. We said it on the stage. I think we're going to say it all year long. Next year is going to be the year 55 by 25. We want our industry to get to a point where, and it's not just HR that's got this challenge. We're challenging the consultants, the vendors, the investors, right? Because investors have a big impact on this.
Investors have a huge impact on this.
All of you need to realize that if we don't do this right, HR has probably the only purview to understand the guardrails that need to be put in place. So if you don't give them the opportunity to have that strategic voice, we're risking a lot inside of our businesses.
Yeah. And I think, Stacy, the one big thing that you said on the stage in September, which really stuck with me, is we've got to stop talking about feature functionality. I know that's fun to talk about, but the reality is we have to talk about outcomes. And those outcomes are what's going to help us drive to that more strategic focus and to do the things that we need to be doing from a people perspective. So I think that's going to be critical. So I'd like to change the tone here just a little bit. And I want to talk about a favorite memory or tradition that you have from this time of year. So Susan, you want to go first? And
sure.
I just want to give people a little bit more personal. Here we are, we're Sapient, but we did something this week actually last week now, that was a lot of fun bringing our team together on a game making fun day online through Zoom, part of that engagement process, right? And that was super fun. It gave everybody an opportunity to kind of get to know people more personally since we're not seeing them in the office these days. And I think, Susan, as you mentioned, this idea of more human, that's going to be more and more important as we move forward and, have this distributed workforce. So I think it's important for us to be a little fun, be a little vulnerable, talk about our lives, and just get to know people a little better. So I thought we'd do that for the rest of this call. Just maybe talk about something fun or memorable or a tradition that you have at the holidays.
Yeah, I love that. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to share. The thing that popped to mind when you asked that question is my mom loves gadgets and gizmos and little things. And so I don't know exactly when it happened. It was after I was an adult, but sometime several years ago, my mom decided that Christmas stockings were no longer big enough, and that instead of Christmas stockings, we were going to have Christmas bags. And those Christmas bags were filled with all kinds of, some people would say junk. I call them treasures. And they were little things that she would pick up at the dollar store or at a craft fair or at Walmart that made her think of us. And she was so cool about it because she would wrap everything individually. So Christmas morning, my sister and I would get together with my mom and her family, and we would open our Christmas bags. And that was more fun and generated more laughter than anything that I've ever done around the holidays. And, as my family gets smaller, I miss those days, and we'll find a way to build that back into traditions as I go forward.
I love that. That's super cool. And I love gadgets. So it's always fun to pull things out of a bag. Oh, that's super cool. That's going to go on my desk. Kind of like that cool vacuum gadget that we bought.
And Velda always knows the gadgets, and she knows what you need.
She knows the popular ones.
She knows the popular ones, and she knows that you need it, even though you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And she's usually right.
Yeah. Stacy, what about you?
Yeah, I got a couple things that kind of flew through my mind. I was like, boy, midnight mass was always special with my parents. And then as I get older with the kids doing things like, feeding the reindeer, I thought, what's something that we've done year over year? I thought, boy, the thing that I kept coming back to was games. I know that sounds kind of silly, but from the time I was at my youngest, as soon as we would get our Christmas presents, the next thing we would do, we would play games, whether that was card games or video games or whatever game was the game of the year, right? We after everybody sort of settled down, it was time to play games. And then as my boys got older and they grew up, then we spent even more time playing, again, a lot of times it was video games, but it was all together playing it, right? Like, when there was a Sackboy, if anybody remembers that back on the PlayStation, it's a game the whole team, like we would literally buy games that the kids could play with us, or board games when the grandparents were over. And we kind of elevated that up till the last couple of seasons where we decided to do a D&D game with the boys, because my kids are kind of spread all over the place. My oldest is out in Hawaii. My youngest was in Wilmington and couldn't come home at the time. And we were trying to figure out, like, how do we get, together with the cousins who are in Ohio and the family members who are all there. And what we decided to do was this sort of D&D Dungeons and Dragons game. And we had I'll tell you, the amount of laughter and the amount of hysterical laughter, I guess is a good way to put it. My youngest did sort of the, what you call dungeon master, and he told the story, but it was just so much fun to see how the younger cousins, played with it and the older cousins got into it. And so my hope is that going forward, we can figure out ways to do that. Again, as we are all virtual, I don't know that our family will always be in one place because of how dispersed everybody is, but to find ways that we can get together, even with my youngest granddaughter, Bella, now, and figure out what games can we play? I just think there's something about putting away all the other stuff and playing a game that just makes a difference. It puts you all in a different mode. So that's probably my best memory, is any kind of games that we used to play.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And it makes me think of that episode of The Big Bang Theory where they do their Christmas Dungeons and Dragons. It's hilarious.
Yes.
Yeah. I've never played that game, but it sounds like a lot of fun. Interestingly, mine is also a game, a very, very simple game that we learned from my great aunt, my father's aunt, when we were very young. And if you called somebody on Christmas Eve, and if you called her, this is how this started. If you called my Aunt Wheezy, she'd answer the phone on Christmas Eve gift. And if she did that, then you had to buy her a gift. So every year it was this big sort of runaround of who's going to call, run to the phone, answer the phone, make sure you say Christmas Eve gift when you answer the phone because you'll get an extra gift. And I think that was part of the thing with my great aunt and my grandmother was they wanted to buy you little, back to your point, Susan, back to little gizmos and trinkets. They were cheap, it was $1, $2 gift, just something fun, or maybe something she just had in the house that she just wrapped up for you, right? So on Christmas Day, you'd get your Christmas presents, but you'd also get your Christmas Eve gift, which was like the biggest deal of all. So funny, we still do that today. Like nobody likes to call anybody on Christmas Eve because they don't want to get the Christmas Eve gift and have to then go figure out, okay, what am I going to get by tomorrow for my Christmas Eve gift? But it really is, it's a lot of fun. And when you're a kid, like you just, you can't wait for the phone to ring. And you knew your aunt or your grandma or somebody was going to call, right? They were going to call just to be calling, just so that you get them, right?
Yeah.
On the Christmas Eve gift. So yeah, I try not to call my mom on Christmas Eve these days because she gets me every year. It's like, I need to call mom, but it's Christmas Eve. I can't call her. So yeah, very simple tradition, but something that lives on in our family. I don't know if anybody else has ever done that, but I just thought that was the coolest thing.
I love that.
That is sweet.
Yeah.
It's funny how all of our moms and our family members love to get those little gifts, right? It's just something, it's not about the money spent. It's about, and again, we all celebrate Christmas, but I know several friends who celebrate Hanukkah and other traditions, right? It's just the idea of buying something, letting people know you're thinking about them, right? Which just makes something really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. Regardless of what it is you're opening, the excitement of opening a package from somebody is just, it's a lot of fun. So what do you wish for our listeners as we close out the year? Do you have a special wish, Stacy, that you'd like to give our listeners as they head into 2023?
I wish in 2023 for our listeners more time and clarity. I know that sounds a little, but I feel like everything has been so rushed the last couple of years. And I think we all learned through COVID sort of what was important and what maybe wasn't important to us. And I think, as we do get back to this evolution of what work is, I hope that everyone has a moment to reevaluate what that means now, not just what's important to them, but what does this new work in this world, and clarity on how they're going to take some steps forward. Because I think that's been my biggest difficulty. And I know a lot of people that I've talked to this year has been in this new world. What's the next step that I have to take? And so I wish for everyone time and clarity. That's my wish.
I like that. Susan, what about you?
Yeah. Mine is a little more basic. I wish for everybody in 2023 more kindness. I think we've gotten away from being kind to each other, and it shows up in all different facets of our life. And I would wish that we kind of file down the rough edges or the sharp edges and just be more kind to each other.
Yeah, I love that. I completely agree. And Stacy, to your point about clarity, I hope that in the new year we can start to get clarity over agreement necessarily, right? And turn some of the bitterness into the kindness that I think, we all want to experience. There's just a lot of challenges. And I think as workers, as family members, as friends, as humans, we want a good life. We want things to be stable and happy. And, we want people to be kind to us and we want to be kind to others. And I think some of that is just going to come down to us understanding our perspectives and others' perspectives. And that may change the way we think about things going forward. So I think we got a lot of work to do, but I think anything's possible. And I'm excited about the new year, looking forward to it. And I know you guys are as well. I really hope our listeners have a great new year, a very prosperous new year, and look forward to you listening to us more in the new year. Yeah. Stacy, you want to give us a couple of plugs here? I know we've put some things out recently, so I want to make sure people know where to find them.
Yeah, definitely. So at this point, to this here in the next few weeks, we have just launched the 2022-2023 annual HR Systems Survey 25th edition. I know, yay! Little celebration, guys. It's bigger than it's ever been. 170 guys. We really actually tried to make it shorter this year, but what we found is that you guys gave us so much information. We had over 5,000 responses. In just written in comments this year. We had so much data. So my big plug this year is go to our website at sapientinsights.com. There you will be able to download the 175-page report that for the 25th anniversary, we have made the decision as a team that report is going to be available for everybody as we have done in the past in aggregate. But if you don't have time to read 175 pages, I get it. There will also still be the key findings available on the website as well. So you can download either of those. Also, if you are interested in getting more in-depth data or support in your sort of HR technology conversations, you can drop us a line at info@sapientinsights.com and schedule some time to talk to myself, Teri, or Susan. We're always open to have a conversation, or sign up for the newsletter to get our ongoing updates on research launches, where we'll be speaking at or visiting, lots of events that we're going to next year already, and when you can participate in the annual survey, which will be in May again this year. So thanks.
Yeah, we're going to want to know if you've gotten more strategic. So that's going to be important.
And look for our LinkedIn group next year that we're launching to help everybody become more strategic. So
yes,
watch for that happening in 2023 as well.
Great point, Susan. I want to thank you guys for coming on the show today. I know we're dialing into the weekend and into the holidays, and there's a lot going on this week as people try to finish up the year and hopefully not do a whole lot next week. I want to thank Brand Method Media Group, who helps us produce these podcasts and run by their amazing founder, Kelly. She's been fabulous and really helped us to make these podcasts great. Our marketing team, Lisa Rinko and Zoe Britton, who are doing a fabulous job on getting our message out there. And hopefully it's resonating with you. And we're giving you some things that you're looking for. We'd also be interested in things you'd like to hear about. So we're always looking for great topics for the show. And want to thank the listeners in our community who we obviously couldn't do this without you. So thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, you can subscribe and leave a rating and a review. We'd love to hear from you. To stay up to date with all the breaking news and other things that we're doing at Sapient Insights Group, as Stacy said, go to the website, send us a message at info@sapientinsights.com. We're here. We want to hear from you, and we look forward to speaking to you again in the new year. So Happy New Year, everyone. Hope it's a great one.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
Bye.